Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello. Good evening.
How's everyone doing this evening? Feel free to pipe into chat with anything that's heavy on your heart. Any state of the market questions you'd like to see answered in tonight's webinar. We will want this to be an interactive affair. We've tried to have a less overwhelming number of slides for our presentation.
We always
tonight.
try that.
We kept adding slides, like a new slide every 10 minutes or so, the hour beforehand here. But yeah, we'd love to focus on whatever is going to be most important to you, is going to bring you the most amount of value. So feel free to pipe in the chat what you'd like to hear about tonight, something that you have a question about, would like to hear about. Put us on the spot. We love it. We love it if someone had a hard question.
Yeah, we absolutely love the interaction, love talking about things that are real life to people, deals that you're working through, thoughts that you're working through. It's always helpful for other people to learn from real life scenarios. So we have some stuff that we'll share here tonight. Let's dive in. Can I get a thumbs up or a yes in the chat or something? Is our slide share working?
Does everything look good to everyone? Looks good here. Great. All right.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's get started.
Dive on in. So who here has a crystal ball? Works flawlessly, yes?
Absolutely. Everyone can
every time
see the future. So just a big disclaimer, state of the market. This is, our interpretation of what's happening in the market. Lots of data here. We try to lead with both emotion, but also qualitative and quantitative information. But it's just that. It's just our projections. No one really knows the future. This is more entertainment than investing or legal or accounting advice. It's just our crystal ball, what we're seeing when we look out there. But it's just that. It's just a crystal ball. So let's just have some fun tonight, talk about state of the market, but get your legal and accounting advice from professionals.
Yes.
A little bit about us. Go for it.
So there's a few reasons why you might want to listen to a few things that we say. We've managed a few assets, closing on $1/3 billion in assets under management. A little bit of real estate sales there. We're in the top 1/3 of 1% of all real estate teams in Keller Williams, the largest real estate organization on earth. Doing a little bit of ground up construction there, over a $40 million project in Byron, Minnesota right now. And we've raised a little bit of capital, over $50 million to date. Black Swan Fund 2.com. We still have a few million left in room and fund too. If you'd like to get involved, here's some things that sound good to you here and make you want to get in the game. That's a good way to get in the game. So a little bit about us and why in the past our crystal ball has maybe been less broken than some other folks, and why we have a little bit of experience and have a little bit of authority to speak to these matters.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of it here, is that we're doing this, all day, every day. This is the full-time job for both of us. We're in, many masterminds, work with many coaches. And so we're very much in the Gemba, as Nick likes to say, in the place of real work, doing real estate investing as our full-time profession. And so we know this industry better than other industries and are happy to share that knowledge. As I was preparing the slides today, I think I've been in a very reflective mood lately. Of course, want to say thank you to everyone that sent text messages and cards and everything about the loss of our baby, our miscarriage. Just thank you so much for that. And that, I just have so much gratitude for this community, and that it transcends just the financial things that we do together, but that, we're reaching out, we're checking on each other. And as I was, thinking about preparing tonight, certainly asking the universe to help me lead people, through. It's easy to lead people when there's times of plenty, right? Like in the last, say, 18 to 24 months, there was a little bit of scare from COVID, but I think pretty quickly the real estate industry realized that COVID was going to greatly benefit the real estate industry. And so it's easy to lead when times are easy. And it's harder to lead when there is uncertainty or fear or indecision or confusion. And so that's certainly the place that I come from tonight. And Nick and I, the thing about our time together is it's completely unrehearsed. So Nick has never heard me say that, but I know Nick leads with that heart too of, what can we do with the experience that we have and the time that we're putting into our real estate investing to lead others, and hopefully to lead others well.
Thank you, Stella.
Yes, thank you, Stella. I appreciate that. So as with anything, we always want to start with the end in mind. We always want to ask ourselves, what is our intention for our time together? What are our goals? What are our outcomes? So we'll go over our predictions from last year. We actually did our last state of the market in February of 2022. So we're doing our next state of the market here about 3 months early, really just driven by, what I spoke to just a few minutes ago, that there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in the market right now. And so we wanted to move this up to help give people, the most up-to-date information out there to guide your investing decisions over the next several months. We didn't want to wait all the way until spring to do this. Our predictions for the future, and then what we're doing now, how we are making our investment decisions, what we think might be reasonable ways to make investment decisions in the future.
It's certainly been kind of the most requested, subject matter that we've had. So, last month our community power hour was the seasons and why, to a certain extent,
There's our tree.
There's the tree.
It's so much bigger in real life than it looks like on the camera.
There's definitely a perspective thing going on. So I am much smaller in real life than this painting. As I get closer to it here, you can see that. But then when I'm right up here, it looks like I'm bigger than the painting.
Yeah, that was a fun little demonstration.
Yes. So if you caught the community power hour last month, in the discussion of seasons, we talked about how knowing all the specific economic indicators is not necessarily critical. You just need to know what season we're in, and we're in the season of winter. But that is, of course, a little frustrating, or might feel like a little bit of a cop-out to say you don't have to know those specific indicators. You just have to know what season you're in. So, the very next month, we're going to talk about those specific economic indicators and, what we see in the market and where we see things going.
So this quote from Tony Robbins, I think, really speaks to why this is so important, not just in real estate, but in everything in life. One of the messages that we talk about a lot is that real estate is just a great way to practice big skills in life, because there's a lot of big decisions that are made in real estate: what to acquire, how much to spend, how to manage it, what renovations, where to acquire, what team to use. All of these are really big decisions. And it's always our hope with real estate investing that not only is it very profitable and that it creates passive income, generational wealth, but that it gives people an opportunity to practice those big decisions so that you can apply it to the real things that matter in life: relationships, charitable projects, the hobbies and the passions that you have, making your community a better place. And so this applies to everything. And right now is really a time to practice it in real estate. And it's that leaders anticipate, losers react. And so the worst thing any of us can do in a time of recession, or even a time of economic confusion, right? In this, quote unquote recession, there's still a lot of really positive indicators out there. It's not all bad out there. I think it's much more confusing than, say, 2008, when it was clearly all bad. Leaders anticipate. The worst thing that anyone can do is just to sit back, to relax, to say, I'm going to wait this out. I'm going to wait for the market to crash and to see that a rebound is happening. We're not.
If I just wait long enough, that perfect moment's going to come by, and I'm going to know exactly when that moment is, because I'm just sitting back and waiting. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We don't invest in the stock market. All of our holdings are in real estate and private equity. But I saw the other day that it was like the single greatest day in stock market gains since, it was either this year or early 2021. Don't quote me on it. But the moral of the story there is that if people had waited out that day, they would wait out a large gain in their overall wealth. So leaders anticipate. Leaders are always asking, if this is what the crowd is doing, what's the next step? Think about whatever game you play or music you listen to. If you're very skilled at those things, you can anticipate the move that's coming up in the game or the note that's coming up in the music. It's the same thing in investing. You want to be a step ahead of the crowd so that you can grow your wealth, protect your wealth, and losers react. And so, our goal tonight is to help you anticipate, to help you see what we're seeing. I hope we do some, Q&A here, can talk about things that you're seeing in your market and deals that you're putting together so that we can all learn and grow together. So leaders anticipate, losers react.
I like that. The next note in the music. That's all we're doing, is we're just playing our instruments every day. So
pretty much
we have some pretty good idea of what note's coming next.
Yeah.
Let fear be a counselor and not a jailer. I really like that one. Elaine and I, we have fear, just like everyone else. So people will sometimes say, like, how is it that you guys are, you're the only ones out there buying right now? What gives you the courage to buy right now? Or, how is it that you guys seem to do it all, or you just never let fear stop you? Oh, no. We let fear drive us. There's lots of things that we fear. We fear, living a small life, disappointing our creator by, denying the greatness that was put in us. We fear failure, and that motivates us to really, if you saw just how many times I run the numbers, I go through our underwriting pro formas before we get a big deal under contract or close on a deal. It might look a little bit OCD. I probably
A
run
little like
through
Beautiful Mind.
something like that. Yeah.
Numbers everywhere.
32-inch screens. Yeah.
Which sheet are you on now, Nick? And you're like,
I'm looking at all of them.
Number 399. I'm like, okay, do you want to go to bed yet?
Right. So, we let the fear guide us and drive us, not paralyze us.
Absolutely.
And it's easy to see how those could be, just opposite sides of the exact same coin. Action is having a predilection or a tendency towards action is one of the most common, traits of great people. They tend towards action versus inaction. That's all you really need to do in life.
All right. Got our little mindset.
How we do? Let's check our report card.
On our mindset?
No, I was gonna say on.
I was talking about, I was just pumped up that we got our mindset in.
Report card on that too. Yeah.
But let's talk about our report card here, since Nick wants to focus on that.
Sorry.
So these were our predictions in our state of the market of February 2022.
Before you listen to any for your entertainment only predictions for 2023, let's see what for your entertainment predictions for 2022 were like. And by the way, I think about 90% of what we said in 2021 ended up coming true in 2022. So I feel like we did pretty well.
Speaking of, you said we it's not like we don't have fear. I always have fear about we record ourselves, we're out there, we say a lot of things. And I kind of going back to that feeling of, I always hope that we're leading people in the right direction. I always hope we're stewarding people well, that we're shepherding people well. But there is a bit of a fear of, we're often making predictions. We're putting out pro formas, we're putting out investments, those sorts of things. It's reassuring when we go back and listen to our older stuff. We're not always right. No human is. But I think we have a pattern and a clear narrative there. Mm-hmm. And it's fun to see it unfold. It's very intoxicating to see it unfold. It makes it, it's for the love of the game. Keeps it very interesting.
So at the start of our 2022 State of the Market, we had a little Salah. That's the name of our daughter. It means to pause and reflect on meeting. The war in Ukraine had just broken out.
Yeah, and days before. Yeah, it was scary. I remember I almost was tearing up. We had the Ukraine flag, and democracy was at risk.
Yes, democracy in the whole world. I'm a little bit of a Ukraine news junkie. I actually created a Twitter account, started consuming Twitter just so I could follow up on the news there. For some reason, it's about 24 hours ahead of Western news for time zones, or I don't know what they're. I don't know if you've been following the news, but as of this past weekend, Ukraine has now recovered more than half of all the territory it lost since our State of the Market in February 2022. So that's an incredible milestone for Ukraine, and an incredible milestone for the free world, for global democracy. We have not, as Westerners, lost our attention on that conflict. We continue to support that conflict to the tune of billions of dollars of military aid, and the war is going in the direction of righteousness, and I think in everyone in the Western world's opinion. So for lots of reasons, a good outcome is happening there, and we'll reflect on that here in just a moment with the outcomes that will probably happen from an economic perspective. Probably the boldest kind of statement I think of our whole State of the Market from February 2022 was all the way back in kind of late December 2021. Elaine called the pandemic. I think our first community hour in the first week of January. I think it was
December, because I was Nick, I'm not sure about that yet, but that's what you and I were talking about privately.
Yeah.
That it seemed like things were changing with COVID, and the new strains that were coming out were less virulent, and that would lead
which is a historical trend.
Yeah.
Every pandemic in history has trended towards greater contagiousness and less deadliness. I'm not using the correct medical terms there.
You're doing a good job.
I don't know why I'm the one talking.
You're doing a good job.
You. Okay, well, thank you. It's a good expectation that the same thing would happen. We're not geniuses here. We just look at the past and assume that that the future is going to rhyme with the past. It may not be exactly the same, but if you can pick up the tune,
I
play your instruments.
remember when we were like 5 days into the lockdowns, like very early, and it was actually here at Keller Williams. Someone asked us to do some speaking here about the pandemic, and we said this will take 2 years, and people were horrified.
Yep.
They were like, "Why? What do
Yep.
you mean 2 years? Don't you mean 2 weeks? Is that a typo?"
And we gave a talk on the seasons.
And we are no pandemic experts. I literally just read everything I possibly could about pandemics for, that like 3 or 4 days leading up to that. And it seems like in history, they last about 2 years.
Yep.
And so I thought, well, probably going to last about 2 years. And that's what
Yep.
happened. And blessedly, the vaccine and everything got us out of it. But yeah, the pandemic really ended in early 2022. No wave of foreclosures. There was a lot of
Yep.
drumbeat. I don't hear that as much now, but
Yeah.
a lot of drumbeat about I'm waiting for this wave of foreclosures. This wave of foreclosures will happen.
I sat in a room with some of the most wealthy, well-resourced people I've ever had the privilege to know in my life. And there was like $1 billion of capital sitting on the sideline. And this went on for like a year. I went to meeting after meeting with this group, and they're like, we're waiting for the wave of foreclosures, and then we're going to buy the foreclosures. And I'm like, I don't think this is going to happen. I mean, I felt like kind of a dummy because I was like, hey guys, I'm buying everything right now. Rates are the lowest they've ever been. Prices are looking pretty good right now. There's still a COVID discount. So I'm buying. And it turned out there was no wave of foreclosures, and all that money just sat on the sidelines for about 18 months.
In February, we said rising interest rates will not fix inflation, that it's a supply and demand problem. I think we're finally seeing just a hair CPI that was just released a few days ago is trending in a favorable direction. It's still, by no means is inflation over or dramatically reduced or anything, but I think we're finally seeing enough pain in the economy that inflation is coming down just a little bit. But we're going to talk a little bit about the supply changes that have happened since then. Inflation will ease after 2022. We're still, carrying on with that prediction. We'll talk about that tonight. And then we predicted strong growth in both single family and multifamily pricing and rents in the short term. I think we're still seeing that. So in our market, we are seeing an increased days on market, but prices are still the same. We're not seeing any, decrease in price. And of course, every market is a little bit different, and we're going to speak to that and how to understand the inventory changes that are happening in any market that you're interested in investing in. But I would say for February of 2022, maybe would you give us a 90%?
Yeah, the closest thing I could find to something that we were just plain wrong on was we said that inflation had peaked in November of 2021, but
that wasn't true.
Yep.
As real estate investors, we love inflation, right? Think about that as anyone that owns assets loves inflation. Obviously, we don't want to see people suffer. We don't want to see people, struggle with food insecurity and all of the things that come from inflation with lower income households. But as folks who own assets, people who own assets should love inflation. So we were wrong about inflation.
It depends on your definition. I should go check the tape or something. How old am I? I should go check the recording. My assessment is that basically it ran hot all the way through 2022. It's still running hot, and it will ease after 2022, which was our prediction. But depending on your metric of choice, certainly many people would say that it did not peak in November of 2021. So I'm going to say we were wrong on that one. But yeah, probably a 90% score somewhere in that territory. So I feel like we did pretty well on our predictions here for state of the market for 2022. And let's talk a little bit about what might be to come. Yeah,
recording everything.
We're just going to blast it all out here. Just let's be bold.
I mean, we don't even have like decoration on this slide. It's just text.
Here are the clear-cut predictions.
These are our predictions for next year.
Don't mistake the clarity of our slide for the clarity of the prediction.
The global energy market will start to stabilize as the conflict in Ukraine settles down. The dynamics that have come about as a result of the Ukraine-Russian conflict are there. I think they're maybe a little hard for us to understand day to day as Americans, because we don't, as a country, spend as much money on food as other parts of the world. We don't struggle as much with food insecurity in terms of like real death from food insecurity. We're not as closely linked to Russia as Europe is in terms of energy use. But the changes that have happened because of Ukraine and Russia have changed the entire world. And we really think that this has been the largest driver of inflation in terms of the cost of energy and the cost of food because of the cost of fertilizer. And that's going to start to stabilize over the next several months as Ukraine continues to take territory. Blessedly, Russia has stayed calm so far in terms of actual, nuclear attack. Let's all pray that that continues. And so that's our prediction there. Anything?
Yep.
You're the Ukraine expert. I don't know why you're talking about the pandemic and I'm talking about Ukraine.
We're just having fun going back and forth here.
I suppose.
No, that's all spot on. In America, we enjoy incredibly low energy prices, and we're very blissfully ignorant of just how challenging the energy markets are elsewhere in the world. And this is the thing. I mean, just the oil price should be the front page of the paper every single day. Elaine and I, we lived in Oklahoma for 15 years, a huge oil and gas hub. And there you could feel how big of a deal global energy prices were on the global economy. This is the fundamental driver of the cost of most things. So it doesn't seem like that should have a direct impact on food, except you have to realize that tractors run on diesel fuel, and the fertilizer is typically that uses petrochemical chemical stocks to create the fertilizer, and the transportation cost of the food is it all comes down to barrels of oil. That's the main input cost for most things in the world, and that's been on a real roller coaster here lately. And I'm not saying it's going to get better, but it's going to be stable and predictable. Like the diesel gas shortage here this winter could be a really challenging moment in the United States, and I'm looking forward to those moments being less exciting here in 2023. Next one, the China COVID lockdowns are starting to ease. So the Communist Party just published a change to some of their language for the zero COVID policy. Now, they would never just repeal the policy. That's not how the government works there. They're so faultless that it would be impossible that they would just rescind a policy like that. But those language tweaks give us a sigh of relief that significant policy changes are coming soon. So, for example, mandatory quarantines for inbound travelers are going away, I think, immediately. Really, it's kind of at a whim that they can decide that COVID levels are too high, and they can just shut down entire cities or entire provinces. So as of right this second, the number one manufacturing province in China is locked down. It's on lockdown right now. You can't leave your house. It's wild. It's hard for us to understand as Americans where COVID is kind of done, but in China, COVID is still extremely real and is having an incredible negative impact on their GDP and on the global supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Apple has stopped making iPhones principally in China. Like that's when things are really bad, right? Again, this is not something that's like really blatant, is easy for us to see, but it has a huge impact on our day-to-day life when everything is slower and much more expensive to get to us. And everywhere in the world that's made in China.
It's likely that in the next year, unemployment will go up. That's certainly, what the Fed has been very outright in saying they would like to see. Or I don't necessarily know that they would like to see, but they think they need to see at least 1 million jobs lost to bring down inflation. So the three things that we just talked about there, energy, the China COVID policy, and unemployment, those are the three largest drivers of inflation. So you might be wondering, like, when are we going to start talking about real estate here? That's all coming. But inflation is so closely linked to the US housing market. We have to talk about these things. And they color the whole picture of everything that we need to understand for the real estate, or everything that we need as the foundation to understand the real estate market are these three things. So, two that I think are I think most people would agree are good is that the energy markets are stabilizing and that the China lockdowns are going to be relaxed a little bit. Unemployment it's more challenging to understand, right? It will bring down inflation. It will soften the labor market. It could potentially lead to increased problems with people making their rent payments or their mortgage payments and all of the things that come from that. But ultimately, inflation has to be tamed so that interest rates come down. So it's all this kind of mixed puzzle, and you have to understand, you kind of think of it as like levers, and as you're pulling one lever, like what happens in other pieces in the puzzle. And when you start to get that whole puzzle together, then it really, crystallizes and makes sense why these things are so important.
Here's the nice thing though. So most people believe, and I think the media perpetuates the idea that you have to just like know everything about everything to understand what's going on in the world. And that's not true. So Black Swan theory, that's, where our name comes from. It would posit that there's really just one big thing. So you just have to understand what's the biggest thing that drives everything else.
What do you think that is right now?
So in January of 2022, we said the number one overlooked risk in the world that people should be on the lookout for is geopolitical instability. And we were right, and it's painful to be right about that sort of thing, and that very much remains the case today. At any moment, Russia could say, enough's enough, we're going to use a tactical nuclear device and see if the world blinks. And that is
that would change everything.
Yeah.
Everything we say tonight would be completely irrelevant.
So I probably spend about 1 hour per day reading Ukraine news. That is an absurd use of my that's more time than I spend on most things in my life. That's how important I perceive the Ukraine conflict to be. Every other event in the entire world takes a backseat to the Ukraine conflict right now. And it blows my mind that it's not the number one headline on everyone, understanding like how likely is it that, that Russia might actually, use nuclear arms and these sorts of things. Like, these are critical concepts for people to understand. Like, why did Ukraine do this drone boat assault on Russian missile frigates? Well, what do those Russian missile frigates launch? Cruise missiles that can be tipped with tactical nuclear weapons. So when that drone boat attack happened, that was a pretty overt assault, and that there wasn't like a nuclear response to that. Like that was a big deal. Like, Russia has blinked many times here in the last few weeks that they could surrender Kherson and blink. This is so much more important than any other global event that's happening right now. So that's the most important thing that's happening.
So assuming that continues to go well, and China continues to open up, and that helps the global supply chain, and unemployment goes up as a result of interest rates going up, it's likely that inflation will ease in 2023. In the next year, we'll have some, everyone will have more clarity on where interest rates will top out. So we really, look to how long recessions have lasted in the past and how long rate increases have lasted in the past. And it's not that long. It's certainly not, decades long or even a decade long. It's usually more, best measured in terms of months. And so we're probably halfway through that. If I think if we had to guess, we're probably about halfway, somewhere between 40 and 60% of the way through this period of rising interest rates. There will be a top out period, and then things will start to come down, and then treasury rates will come down toward the end of 2023. We're going to talk some more about rates and such tonight.
And I hope everyone can understand how it would be totally reasonable for us to say, we don't know right now how high rates are going to go, but no matter how high they get, they're probably going to be going down this time next year. And so you just have to be, we've observed that really smart people like Gary Keller gets up and makes predictions about the future every 6 months. And that dude is always right. We've been watching him for years, and he has never been wrong. You just have to get really specific about your predictions. You have to make really specific predictions. So we can't tell you, are rates going to go to 15%? Probably not. Are they going to go to 10%? Probably not, but maybe. But no matter how high they get, they're probably going to be going down on the later half of around this time next year. So
absolutely. This is the Baltic Dry Index, one of Nick's favorite indices.
So you want to know about really smart people, talk to manufacturers in China who need to look at supply demand curves and stuff and figure out, should we be shipping goods to the United States to sell, that are not going to sell until 6 months from now. Those shipments are way down. Manufacturers' output is way down in China. And ultimately, the cost of a shipping container is a really easily observed proxy for all these different data points. So how expensive is it to move a cargo container around in the global economy? That's, friction in the economy. You can see on this chart, historically, it'd be, less than $1,000 to move a shipping container around. And, at the peak of the pandemic, we got all the way up to $5,600. If you're shipping cheap manufactured goods from China, the cost of that container grossly exceeds the value of the stuff inside the container, the manufactured, input costs of it anyway.
I remember when, I think we may have told this story before, but it's brief, so I'll tell it again. We were meeting with a very well-respected older businessman who has a flooring company. He's been selling flooring for probably longer than Nick and I have been alive. And we went up to talk to him about flooring for our Stonehaven townhome community. We were doing 30 new construction units, and in addition to all the renovations, we really wanted to talk with him directly about getting flooring. And we would ask him like the price of flooring. And I remember so vividly, he just kept talking about the price of shipping. Like he's like, well, what does it matter if, this one is $1.20 and this one's $1.50 if it cost me $20,000 to get it here? Like, and he just kept coming back to that like over and over and over. And I think that's really when it really sunk in for me, like how bad things were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a minute there, it was impossible to get things like appliances and flooring. And you can see today we're already back down to $13.55 was spot today. So maybe 50% more than kind of the seasonal peak that we might see during the pre-pandemic years. This is a leading indicator. So in all that you do, try to look at the leading indicators, not the lagging indicators. The retailers that bought things 6 months ago, they bought them when shipping containers were much more expensive. They need to sell those inventories that they paid escalated shipping prices for. But pretty soon they'll have to either discount their wares to match the new incoming, wares that you can buy at a cheaper price, or they'll be able to turn those over and sell new discounted rate goods. So we know that cheaper prices are coming and inflation is going to go down and interest rates will go down with it.
I just went a bunch of slides forward. Sorry there.
That's okay. Here's another really fun one. So something we've mentioned a lot is just how good things here are in the United States. And I found a slide out there to try to visualize or quantify that concept of just how darn good things are in the United States right now, and how relatively challenging they are everywhere else in the United States, and why that's going to have a favorable impact on interest rates here in the near future. So we've spoken about how like the Bank of England almost had all their pensions kind of go under, become insolvent, and the Bank of England had to step in with quantitative easing. So right now the Bank of England is kind of yelling at the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Federal Reserve, to say, stop raising your interest rates so much because we can't afford to keep raising our interest rates. But what happens if the U.S. keeps raising our interest rates and other governments don't raise their interest rates? Capital starts to flee those markets and come to U.S. markets, particularly if you're in one of those countries where your debt is denominated in U.S. dollars, or you have other commodities that are denominated in U.S. dollars, and oil is going to be the biggest commodity that is frequently denominated in U.S. dollars. That it makes incredibly challenging economic conditions for all those other countries. And all of a sudden there's all this capital flight into the United States, where there's a really strong dollar. I'm sure you've heard about how strong the dollar is right now. The dollar is so strong that it's becoming disruptive to the global economy. So the reason the Fed might stop raising rates so much is not to protect the U.S. economy, but to protect the economies of every other country in the world. That's just how strong the U.S. economy is. We are the undenied leaders of the free world for the first time in my lifetime since the fall of the Berlin Wall. And that's created a lot of really favorable conditions, economic conditions for us. The U.S. dollar is the reserve currency of the world. So to give you some perspective of how extraordinary, how extreme this disparity is. So this chart right here is world economic conditions, and if they are restrictive or accommodative. So accommodative is when there's like a recession and your central bank takes interest rates negative, and they're buying bonds and stuff, and those would offset the kind of negative economic conditions that are out there. And then when policies become restrictive, when the central bank's raising rates and taking assets off their balance sheet, those would be restrictive conditions. So right now we are this is an index for all economies in the world. This was put together by Goldman Sachs. This is actually one of their internal only pieces of documentation, but I happen to follow a person who is able to get their hands on it. And this is the most restrictive economic policy conditions have been in the entire time that Goldman Sachs.
So the dark blue line is the world.
Correct. The dark blue line is the world. This is the most restrictive those conditions have been ever in all the time Goldman Sachs has ever compiled this data. And the United States, so the whole world is at 151 on this index, and 100 is supposed to be your neutral point, and we usually fluctuate plus or minus like 10 points on that scale. The world is at 151. It is like off the charts restrictive right now. And the United States is at 101. The United States is at 101. We're just like 1% into restrictive territory, and the rest of the world is off the charts into restrictive territory. So hopefully that gives you just some perspective on how fortunate we are in the United States. It's easy to get on CNN and think that like the sky is falling, but when you read global economic news, like it's just so darn good here. We're just so lucky to have really plentiful, affordable energy and really functional government that's really low corruption, that is handling this crisis extraordinarily well, is leading the whole rest of the world on how to handle this crisis. We're just so lucky. Things are just so good here.
You're like a commercial for the United States tonight.
It's true. Like I go look at CNN and it's just all and every I
haven't seen you so passionate in like weeks.
It's just frustrating and confusing. You go look at any US news outlet and it just looks like the sky is falling. And y'all, we're just so lucky. Like like things are really good here and things are really challenging everywhere else. But what that means is like we're in winter. There's no doubt about it. But our winter is a lot warmer, a lot cozier than everyone else's winter, and it's probably going to give us.
We're like a Texas winter.
We're like a Texas winter, right? And
Minnesotan winter.
That's right.
Like snow on the ground today.
Yeah,
snow that's stuck, like an inch of snow.
We're going to emerge from this winter so strong. Like the economic conditions are going to be so favorable in the United States. We're going to be able to buy, building materials and manufacturing inputs at such a discounted cost compared to other countries. We're going to have such a huge, advantage from like a government solvency perspective. Like a lot of governments are probably going to go bankrupt as a result of this current situation, have really low credit ratings, not be able to borrow money in the future. I mean, it's going to take a generation for other countries to catch up to the gap that the United States is. This is like the United States coming out of World War II, how extreme the advantage is and our advantage has now gotten so big that it's almost becoming a little bit destabilizing to the world. And we're having to like pull back on our monetary policy to let the rest of the world catch up. So I know that this chart might seem a little abstract, but I hope that quantifies just how insane, how good things are in the United States right now, and how challenging things are in the rest of the world. And if you go out and you buy a little bit of real estate located in the United States, you're probably going to do pretty well. That's all there is to it. Like, this is not rocket science. Elaine and I are not geniuses. We just found a good horse that we had the truly, great fortune to be born in here, or horse born on top of. I don't know.
I wasn't going to call you out that you were mixing things up in your euphoria.
Like three different mixed metaphors there. That's all there is to it. And you're probably.
I think you were saying that we back the horse that is real estate.
Is
U.S. real estate.
Yeah, U.S. real estate specifically. I would not buy real estate in most other countries in the world right now, because you would sincerely run the risk of like your property being taken away from you in a government collapse or in a monetary devaluation or something like that. No such risk here in the United States.
Well, let's talk about U.S. real estate. That
was abstract. Let's get super concrete.
Okay, so these are our predictions for single family homes based on what we're seeing in the market and what we're hearing from other people in other markets, Gary Keller's mastermind, some of the greatest minds in real estate. So certainly what we're seeing is that there are few new listings. I think sellers are experiencing a whole range of emotions of almost sort of a loss aversion. Well, I know my neighbor sold for this much and maybe I'm not going to get that much, so I'll just wait. Some people are have really low interest rates, and so it might be hard for them to upsize or downsize with the change in the interest rates that have happened. Of course, we're in the true winter time of the United States. After kids are back to school, that's always a time where there's less inventory. So few new listings, and that's going to keep low inventory. And as with anything in economics, supply and demand control price. So when there's low supply, that tends to mean there's higher price. And if you think about like the ratios, it was recently as 3 or 4 months ago, there were 30, 50, 100 buyers per property. And it's not an unfair assessment to say that in some markets, like 90% of the buyers have left the market. but that still leaves 3, 5, or 10 buyers per property. And it only takes one offer to close a property. So we're seeing mild changes in terms of the ability to have a little bit of negotiation room in terms of like closing date or whether there's an inspection or those sorts of things. But really, we're not seeing any change in pricing yet. And I think that's generally true around the country. Some markets are seeing some pricing changes, but most are not because of low inventory.
Five, maybe 10% in the most impacted markets. And you
Yes.
can go look at like that peak listing price that they never actually sold for in the spring and see that listing is now in the fall for 20% lower. Well, that wasn't a realistic price back at the absolute peak of the peak. When you look at, year over year where that property would have been listed, at this time in 2021,
Mhm.
it's probably not any different.
Yeah, our year over year data for Rochester, Minnesota is still like 12.8% higher purchase price
Yeah.
so that would be October, because the November data is not out yet, in October of 2022 versus October of 2021. Certainly the markets that had the most dramatic escalation are likely to have the most dramatic decline. Rochester tends to be a fairly moderate market, which is why we like it so much. Prices decline but not by much. Of course, we're sticking with our no wave of foreclosures because there's still so much equity out there and there are still so many buyers. And so there's an opportunity for sellers to sell and they still have lots of equity to work with. So they're not getting into a situation where, let's say, they can no longer pay for their mortgage because of a death, a divorce, job loss, those sorts of things. If they are underwater, then they have to foreclose. But if they have some equity, they can at minimum walk away breaking even. So we're still predicting no wave of foreclosures. And then I'd like for you to speak to real estate agents and brokerages.
Yeah, it's easy to think about this from like a sky is falling perspective, but this is the normal season. There's, in wintertime, people die, people starve to death. Every real estate
Economic winter.
an economic winter, yep. Well, in Minnesota there is still a little bit of that, but not common. In the real estate market, agents, about 90 to 95% of agents, they don't make it through their first year. This is a eat what you kill kind of business, and just most new agents don't have the grit to succeed. And then those agents, those few agents that survive their first year, about 50% of agents that survive their first year make it to their first economic downturn. They don't survive their first economic downturn. Now, of those 50% of agents that survive, so at this point, we're talking about probably 1 in 1,000 agents, 1 in 500 agents, something like that. They keep their license until they die. And it creates this long tail distribution where 90% of transactions are conducted by about 10% of agents. And those 10% of agents are the grit, the gritty, old timers who have been through a downturn or two. And, I network with them and hang out, and they chuckle about, 08 and the downturn before that, and the downturn before that, and the downturn before that. And it takes you have to have a lot of grit to make it through those downturns successfully. At the end of the day, it's just part of the business. So you might see a little bit of doom and gloom from real estate agents. So, Wells Fargo, their year over year mortgage business is down about 90%. Rocket Mortgage, their year over year profitability is down 93%.
We should have had that as a bullet point in here. That's so important.
I had to cut something somewhere.
I'm glad you said it.
Yeah, Wells Fargo, their global mortgage workforce is about 4,000 people. They've cut that workforce in half this year. So about 2,000 people have lost their jobs. Probably, I'm going to guess another 1,000 people at a minimum are going to lose their jobs if their originations are down by 90%. This is pretty normal. Like Gary Keller was telling you, this moment was coming 6 months ago. This should be a surprise to no one. And we've been mentioning this stuff for 6 months. So you might hear a little bit of doom and gloom from some professionals, just to find out, are they new at this? Because if they are, then yeah, it does seem pretty crazy to them. But if it's someone who's been around for a cycle or two, they'll know that this is kind of how it always feels. So there will be some agents and some brokers that exit the business, but that's just that's one of the actually kind of my favorite things about our industry, is that you have to have an incredible amount of grit to survive in our industry, and that's really the only real qualification is just grit.
And I think, so we have a team that does all of our single family acquisitions and just really keeping a close pulse on the pricing. And they sent us some properties today in neighborhoods here in Rochester that we know very well. And pricing is still very strong, and asked me to comment on, what my thoughts were on that. And it's like a no lose situation for real estate investors who already own real estate, that if prices are high, your net worth stays high, your equity stays high. If prices go down, you have the opportunity to acquire. So like no matter what happens, there's an opportunity to win. And it all goes back to mindset. It all goes back to finding a win-win solution, to being resourceful, to figuring out a way to take advantage of the season. So we're not seeing price declines yet, but if and when we do, we're excited for them because it means we can buy real estate on sale.
Yep. And there might be some price declines, absolutely, especially seasonally here, but we don't have a single dial on our dashboard that says that there's any kind of crash coming. We're talking a 10% slide, something like that. And we've got a few graphs to back that up here. So this is the up to the second data that comes straight from the MLS. And we went and pulled data for Minneapolis. You just had a large, 3.5 million person MSA. Minneapolis is going to be one of the more steady MSAs in the country. So it's going to be more exaggerated than this. If you look at Phoenix, Austin, Jacksonville, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Boise.
Boise's
There's lots of kind of boom bust markets, Las Vegas, where you're going to see more exaggerated statistics than this. But then there's lots of boring markets like Minnesota. We love boring markets, and this is one of them. So it's easy. Hopefully you can look at this chart.
This you should be thinking when you're looking at this. This is your yo-yo on an escalator metaphor right here.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So there's a normal seasonal up and down that's very significant. By the way, what season do you think we do most of our acquisitions in? Q3, Q4, when those prices are naturally the lowest, and all you need to do is catch that normal seasonal swing, and you can be very successful just on that alone. But you can see, so this is median sales price for the last decade in the Minneapolis-St. Paul MSA, 3.5 million people. And you can see how you could see an article on CNN that says like prices have gone down from 350K to 300K or something like that. So that would be a 15% erosion of sales price just in the last few months alone. And that could be mathematically accurate, but you can also see how this
has happened every winter.
Right. That's happened every single season. And when you look at year over year for our market anyway, pricing is still up double digits. What was the number you'd mentioned?
I think it was 12.8.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So just look at the all-time data, and it can be extraordinarily comforting. Let's go a layer deeper. Let's look. So price is a lagging indicator. Price is a lagging indicator. It's the one that we kind of care about the most as investors, but it's like the last thing to change. Let's look at the next most recent or the next deeper, more lead indicators. That's inventory. And you can see that inventory has been going down for the last decade. And we've talked about this phenomenon, and it got lower and lower through the pandemic. It got even lower. And finally, it's still not actually any higher than it was last year. We are at seasonally adjusted, the lowest inventory in history. So there's zero economic incentive for a seller to reduce their price. Even if the home doesn't sell because interest rates are triple what they were a year ago, why would a seller ever reduce the price on the home if there's no other cheaper home for sale? That makes zero logical sense.
And if we just trend this line backwards from where we are here, it's about the same inventory as 2016.
Yeah, it's not a huge change. And if you go all the way back to like 2010, I only went back 10 years, but you can go back even further than this. The inventory went up to like a 6-month level, which is what economists would consider like a classical equilibrium point for the MLS for single family homes. We've been just kind of flirting with extraordinarily low inventory levels between 1 and 2 months of inventory. And, as recently as just a few months ago, less than 1 month of inventory. So let's go one level deeper, and that's showings per listing. So this is like hyper real-time data that only licensed agents can get this data that have access to the showing network. So here you can see showings per listing has dipped down, but it's still not at a crazy low level. If you just go back to like 2013, 2014, 2015, we're at more showings per listing than that time period. So it honestly probably has more to do with the season than with anything else. We just got, several inches of snow today. As a realtor, I can tell you that not a lot of people like to go out and do showings when there's an active blizzard. That's just how it works. So I hope that you can look at these charts and see how, when I say there's not a single dial on our dashboard that says there's some sort of impending crisis, like, yeah, we just don't see anything out there. There could be some sort of price erosion in the future. That's entirely possible. 6 months, a year from now, I don't know if interest rates do keep running into double-digit territory, or it takes a really long time before rates come back down and affordability just really kind of drives prices lower, but there is just not a single data point out here that says that there's some kind of big price collapse coming. Does anyone have any questions about any
That's
of
just
this?
what I was going to say. So this is the data for single family. Any questions? You can either put it in chat or unmute yourself, come on camera. We'll take a minute here to pause and see if anyone has any questions, any brave souls.
Yeah, y'all came here for some real estate state of the market. Here is the state of the market. This is it. We've got 50 people on right now. Some really smart people I see on the line.
We're gonna listen to tapes tonight.
Let's play a tape on the line, on the party line.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Fire away. Who is this?
Excellent. My name is Candy. I'm calling in from San Diego, California.
Love it. Long time listener, first time caller.
I have been, I think I've been on your calls maybe 2 or 3 times now. Yeah, I just found out about you. I think it was through Bigger Pockets.
Awesome.
I believe. But I have a question.
Do you have?
So you don't think that there's going to be a major price reductions possibly in 2023?
We don't have any data right now that shows that. It could happen, but we don't have a single chart, a single graph, a single dial that says that at this time that can be expected.
Yeah. So first we would have to see a much lower number of showings per listing, right? That's the first thing that would have to happen, kind of doing these graphs in reverse. Is first we would have to get to where there's properties on the market and there's no showings at all. If there's no showings, there's no buyers. And then we would have to get to where inventory goes up quite a bit, days on market goes up. We're at 6 months or more of inventory, and we'll go back one slide. So right now we're at about a month and a half, let's say a month and 3/4 if we want to be like pessimistic. So that would have to go up quite a bit, and then price would really change. So if we work from price to inventory to showings per listing is essentially like a surrogate for number of buyers that are in the market. We have to work our way backwards through that data to predict that there would be a dramatic decrease in price, and the data just doesn't quite show that yet.
Understood. I'm a realtor here in the San Diego area. Awesome. And we're definitely seeing more price reductions. Days on market are much longer than they have been. Properties are definitely sitting much longer.
How many days on market?
It depends on the area, but I would say a little over 30.
Okay, so still like a relatively short, number of days on market. I would consider, 3 to 6 months to be like a historically, normal set of days on market. But by recent standards, yes, 30 days on market is grievous pricing error and what's wrong with the property. Yep.
Yeah, but we still have very low inventory here. Yes. So that's part of the problem. Yes. Do you see more properties coming on the market at all? Or, I know you said there's not going to be a wave of foreclosures or anything like that, but, do you think there is going to be any foreclosures at this point? Because we don't have any here.
I don't think we have a single foreclosure
in our foreclosure in.
I don't think we've seen a foreclosure in
long time,
2 years,
something like that.
Justin and I think maybe Riley from our team are still on the line. There we go again. They might be able to comment if they've seen any foreclosures, but I just don't think so because there's so much equity, right? Yeah. So a buyer has an opportunity to sell and even to sell quickly at a lower price and still walk away without having to go through a foreclosure process. So we're not seeing that here. Larry asked, do you think?
Real quick,
go ahead.
I just want to answer.
This question kind of went with that, but go ahead. Yeah.
So will more listings come? No, and I think. That sounds like a really aggressive answer there, like just no. So let's say that you bought a house a year ago and maybe you're in kind of financial trouble and you want to downgrade your house. If you reduced the value of your house by you sold your house and bought another house worth half as much as the house that you bought a year ago, your payment would still not go down. Now, first of all, very few people are willing to actually take a step down in terms of the school district their kids are in, or commute time to work, to reduce the go sell a house for $1 million and buy it $500K. Very few people are truly willing to do that. They say it and they think about it, but then when they actually go look at a house with a realtor, they're like, whoa, no, I'm going to put in some overtime. I'm going to do whatever it takes to maintain my standard of living here. But even if they did that, their cost of housing would not actually go down. And that's not
Right.
something that's reflected in CPI. That's just a defect in CPI that does not take this effect into consideration. And so what's going to happen is, in the past, there would have been all of a sudden this listing for, a house in downtown San Diego, and then they'd go buy a house in, some suburban perimeter that's like a 1-hour commute away. Because of the current set of economic conditions, they just won't sell. They're like it's going to take extreme distress or motivation or need for someone to sell a home that has been purchased or financed anytime in the last few years.
Right.
And so there's going to be very few listings, and there's just going to be no inventory. People will put the property on the market as a long-term rental or as an Airbnb rather than selling it, because they know it's a bad time to sell. The housing seller home seller sentiment index is at like an all-time low, the Fannie Freddie sentiment index. And people know that they can't necessarily get the top dollar that they would have gotten 6 months ago. So emotionally, they just know it's not a time to sell.
Right. Do you think we're going to see interest rates go down to 2.5 again, or 2.53% roughly? Do you think we'll see that again?
Not anytime soon. I don't think so. I think it's very likely that we'll get to low 4s. That's kind of my prediction. What's the 5-year at today? You said yesterday it was like 4.8.
We're under 4.
Yeah.
So we're doing
No,
okay.
we're under 5.
Well, no. So that was the 5-year treasury.
Okay.
Yeah. So 5-year treasury was at 4.5, just like midweek last week. And now it dipped under 4.
Under
So
4.
it was
Okay.
huge improvement there. But it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while before. So the Fed has racked up a ton of mortgages on its balance sheet. That's the key thing to realize, is that is the mechanism that they've used to synthetically pump money into that economy. And they're going to want to unwind that balance sheet. And they're going to do that by selling those mortgages. And that's going to put synthetic upward pressure on rates for mortgages. So it put synthetic downward pressure on rates for mortgages when they were buying those mortgages to inject money into the economy. And if you look at the M2 index, you can go to like the Fred website, go look for M2. That's the world, the US money supply. You can see like there's too much money in the money supply right now, and the Fed needs to reel that back in. You don't have to be a genius to understand this stuff. Like, just, you can draw a line on this chart and see which way it's supposed to go. The Fed needs to sell off those mortgage-backed securities. And so the rate is going to go up. I mean, I could see us getting like 10% mortgages. I don't think that's out of the question in the slightest. And I don't think anybody should be banking on mortgage rates being low in any way, shape, or form anytime soon.
I thought you said you thought they were going to come back down towards the end of 2023 earlier. Did I miss it?
Treasury rates will be coming down this time next year. 100% likely, or 99% likely that's going to be the case. And those mortgage rates will probably follow the treasury rates. Will they get to 10% first? Maybe.
Wow, you think they're going to get up there, huh?
I think so. Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's just the math.
Gotcha.
Excellent questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love the interaction. Thank you for joining us and sharing what's going on in San Diego.
Yeah. Did you want
Absolutely. Can I have one more question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you guys recommend I'm looking to buy a small apartment building somewhere in the US. Any recommendations on, good emerging markets?
Well, we have a fantastic course.
I love that smile.
But it's a long answer. We've got a great course. 100% of the revenue goes to charity. You go to meetblackswan.com. You can check out our course there. It's a pay what you can model. So we answer that question in exhaustive detail, and then we have a monthly group coaching calls for our students there to answer that question in like acute detail for your specific situation if you so choose.
The quick answer is, we really think that if people want to be active investors, you should invest as close to your own home as possible. In San Diego, that might be challenging because it's expensive, but is there a market, an hour away that that you have a connection to? Failing that, invest in a market that you have some sort of connection to. You grew up there, your brother lives there, you visit there frequently, whatever it is, that you have a relationship with that market. The good streets, the bad streets, where the
maybe
nice
an
parks
operator
are.
there.
Exactly. And then and only then should someone really be looking at things like demographic data, like population growth, job growth. really it's about an unfair advantage. It's about knowing a market. You always want to make sure that you're in a market that has population growth and job growth. No matter how well you know a market, if the population growth is going down, it's unlikely to be a good investment market. But really, you should have an unfair advantage, check to make sure that the population and job growth makes sense, and then invest in that market. We
Sounds
invest in
good.
Rochester, Minnesota.
In our backyard.
Most people have no idea where we are. They're like, oh, Minnesota, you must be close to Canada. Like even people in the medical profession, like have some sense that the Mayo Clinic is here, but kind of not really. They're like, oh, is that Rochester, New York? It's a fantastic investment market because no one knows about it. And it has great cash flow and great appreciation. But if we were just, looking at like kind of the sexy markets like Jacksonville or Memphis or Boise or, some of those like popular names, Phoenix, we probably would have much less success than investing here because we know this market very well. And so we're able to have an unfair advantage. Anyone that wants to be an active investor, that's really how we recommend they invest.
Yeah.
Excellent question.
It's a great question
Thank
from
you.
Larry here.
Absolutely. Thank you for chiming in.
Yes, thank you. I'm not going to dive deeply into it. Do you think Airbnb collapse could change your graphs? That's strong language, collapse. If there were a significant number of Airbnb operators that wanted to release those properties back into supply as owner occupant properties, probably not. So I've seen different estimates on how many of these homes have been pulled out of supply to be changed into use as an Airbnb. It's single digit millions, and there's double digit millions of shortfall between supply and demand for residential housing units in the United States today. This is called shadow inventory. These Airbnb units, properties that could potentially be in inventory, could be for sale, for the right price or something like that, or if there was a big enough downturn in Airbnb. Right now, I think we're seeing maybe like a 30% decline in Airbnb revenues right this second, which we're always have had kind of a concerning eye towards Airbnb, and so I apologize for any Airbnb people on the line here, but that is what the market data is showing right now, and it's very likely that some of these properties could go on the market soon, or certainly are in shadow inventory now. There's an agent that has a pocket listing. It's not on the MLS yet, of an Airbnb that's maybe struggling and would sell for the right price. And that just has not moved the needle.
And I think there's really two different markets. And again, we don't do any Airbnb. Not only do we not do any Airbnb, we actively acquire properties and convert them from short-term rental to long-term rental.
We acquire struggling Airbnbs all the time. We've acquired like 30 or 40 of them just in the last 6 weeks.
Yep. So I think there's kind of two potential markets here. There's those homes that can easily be converted to a long-term rental or be sold to an owner occupant. Those properties will likely do fine. That's what we've always recommended to people. If you want to try this Airbnb thing for the increased cash flow or for the tax benefits, pick a house that can run as a long-term rental or can be sold to an owner occupant. And then there's the other type of housing that's essentially quasi hotels. Big houses, 10 plus bedrooms, 5, 6 plus bathrooms that really aren't housing. They're quasi hotels that people are operating as short-term rentals. I think we could see a real collapse in those. And I mean, we have phone calls every single day of high income professionals who can't service their mortgage. So they're dipping into their earned income from their jobs. Their spouse is upset with them, just all sorts of real struggle. And yet it's challenging for them to sell because interest rates have gone up. So I think we'll see kind of two different markets. The kind of regular houses will just be absorbed into inventory, and quasi hotels will likely struggle more.
Yeah, and we don't hear about the Airbnbs that are crushing it, and we do know some people with Airbnb, and they're making $500K per year on these luxury rentals, and they've got a secret sauce, that makes them exceptionally successful. We just get the call about the ones that aren't doing so great. So we have a biased perception there, but I think Elaine really kind of nailed it. And then there's an additional rub there that people frequently do cost segregation and accelerated depreciation and bonus depreciation on these Airbnbs. So they now have active losses that need to be recaptured if they sell. And most people, they don't necessarily even have the money to pay the tax man if they were to sell that property.
Mm-hmm.
So that's yet,
and they don't even know that depreciation needs to be recaptured.
Yeah, they don't even realize they are in a deep 6-figure hole on one of these deals until they actually talk to their CPA or whatever about selling it. That's when they realize, I guess we just have a vacation home now. I guess, we're not selling it. So there's a lot of factors we see where, it's possible, particularly in some of these markets with these giant ultra luxe, 7-figure homes, that there could be like a little bit of a collapse phenomenon. But for the most part, we don't see it happening. People are just going to keep feeding them. People are just going to keep running negative cash flow because they can't even afford to recapture their, active losses on it, the depreciation, and they're not going to sell the properties, and it's not going to result in a huge wave of new inventory.
I wanted to speak to Priya said in the Denver area, prices are down 10% this month, anecdotally. So that's okay. And that's normal. I pulled up our median sales price for Minneapolis. Remember, Nick said we do most of our acquisitions in Q4. It's been that way going back 10 years. And so when we look at median sales price, say this like highest dot here, that might be like a little over, let's say 355. And then the lowest dot here where the the data stops is a little over 300. So let's maybe call that 310. That's seasonally adjusted and that's normal. So that's what we were speaking to, that folks are saying, well, prices are going down, prices are going down. That always happens in almost every market in the country, particularly those markets where there's weather changes. Markets where there's fewer weather changes, that's maybe a little less dramatic, but it's not just the weather. It's kids being in school, holidays, just kind of all of the cultural patterns of the US calculator. So I wouldn't quite call that, any sort of price reduction so much as a normal seasonal variation that skilled investors can take advantage of. There's a reason why we closed 4 major deals. Was it last week or the week before?
A couple weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Like that's a very normal pattern in our investing trajectory because of understanding this data. So I'm not surprised that you're seeing that in Denver.
Can you see how it is? Both statements are true, that on this chart, prices have gone down 10% in the last month or in the last few months, but also prices are completely unchanged if you look at the 10-year trend. Can you see how both of those statements can be true at the same time? And that's why it's so important to look at that longitudinal data to have that long-term perspective.
Let's talk about multifamily. So we do a lot of multifamily. About half of our assets are single family, half of our assets are multifamily. These are our predictions for multifamily.
So we've mentioned this a little bit, but operators that got variable rate debt in the last couple of years, especially with these non-recourse Wall Street kind of loan shark debt funds, they're gonna have a tough time. We just closed on an asset 2 weeks ago from a person that had variable rate or an organization, an institution had variable rate debt on the asset, and they weren't able to make their debt service payments anymore. These people thought they were super clever when they locked in this low 2% rate debt a year ago or even 6 months ago, and they don't feel so smart now. Or even just renewing they say, oh, well, we're smart and we got a cap, we got a variable rate, but then we bought a cap. But all of a sudden their monthly escrow to renew their cap went from $2,000 a month to $40,000 a month. These are real numbers. All of a sudden that asset, the numbers just don't work on it anymore. And if you would have just gotten fixed rate debt back when, you'd be just fine. These people are going to suffer, and it's probably going to be kind of a private suffering. No one's going to come out and advertise that their real estate syndication has collapsed. That's something that's always a little puzzling to us, is people privately talk to us all the time about like losing money in other real estate syndications or other real estate ventures, but they never want anyone to know about it. They feel ashamed that they made an error or something like that. It's like, well, that's how you keep the industry clean and honest and stuff, and it's certainly not our place to disclose anyone else's information. Anything you share with us is always very private. But in private, a lot of operators are going to suffer. We've already picked up a couple of deals from this phenomenon, and we expect we're going to pick up quite a few more with the capital remaining in Fund 1 and Fund 2. So it's just being ready at the right time of the season.
So we're poised to excel because we've always used local regional banks. Our peers are like, I don't understand why you use local banks. Why aren't you using, the big banks, Fannie, Freddie? And we've just always believed in relationships, and all of the debt that we have on all of our assets, including all of our recent acquisitions, it's all fixed. I think our highest debt is like 5.1%.
Yeah.
And the relationships with these banks, they've always been valuable, but they're particularly valuable now as we're able to get debt that really isn't available to someone that doesn't have these small bank relationships.
Yeah. We see rent growth is going to slow down or stop. So there's a big, kind of run up of rent growth up through the first half of this year, which is what we predicted, 9 months ago, 10 months ago. That's something that saved some of these operators maybe that got in a little over their heads or ahead of their skis there. One saving grace there is that right now there's a lot of loss to lease. So maybe you had 30% rent escalations in the spring of this year, maybe you're coming back down to earth and you've got, 15 or 20% rent escalations now, but you have some older leases that haven't renewed in a while. And so you still are going to have a little bit of makeup on your loss to lease on your rent roll. So that will save some of these operators, and it's not just going to be kind of an about face or anything like that. But certainly I would not pencil in any kind of rent growth into your pro forma right now. There's going to be 1 million jobs lost here in the next year. Wage growth is going to stall out, and people are not going to be able to pay higher rent rates. That's not how the economics are going to work. We're going to see low inventory. So, we've seen this for a while. There was a huge glut of inventory at the beginning of this year. We didn't close on a single deal in the first 9 months of this year in the multifamily space because we wrote offers on deals and just pricing was insane, just absolutely crazy. Like the numbers just made no sense. There was tons of inventory, but the pricing was atrocious on 100% of it. And now with interest rates high, sellers know that it's not such a great time to sell. So inventory is very low. We're scooping up as many things as we can get our hands on right now because prices are low right now. Probably 20% off of their peak. Again, if you just went back like 12 months, I don't know how big that delta would be versus 12 months ago. Probably not that significant, but probably 20% off of its peak from this past spring. And inventory is probably going to be low for quite some time because sellers are going to know it's just not a great time to sell as interest rates remain high. Transaction volume is going to slow way down. And again, this is going to go kind of hand in hand with, a lot of retail, single family home, real estate agents exiting the business as transaction volume slows down, commission income slows down for those individuals. There's just going to be fewer closings for all the different service providers in that industry. And prices, I don't think they're going to go down much more than they've gone down already. So, we're seeing pricing being off of its peak from earlier this year. Probably not being that different from where it was, 12 months ago. People know multifamily is a very safe harbor for capital, and we're seeing people continue to, pay essentially the same cap rates now as they were paying, a year ago, even though interest rates are way higher now than they were a year ago. So people are actually, buying at cap rates that are way lower than the interest rate they're paying, being negatively levered or negatively geared, and that's just what the market has spoken. Like multifamily is kind of the favorite asset class for people to be in, and people are happy to pay a premium for it even when interest rates have continued to go up. Many operators, maybe many syndicators, fund managers, lenders in the business are probably going to exit the business, in conjunction with those first couple of bullet points there and reduce transactional volume. And then again, we'll call out that this is regional in nature. So, Phoenix, Dallas, Houston, Jacksonville, Boise, like these markets that saw prices like triple in the last few years, they're crashing hard right now. And, inventory will go up in these markets, and there will be more transactions under duress. In some of the more boring markets, like here in Minnesota, it's not as boom and bust. It's more of kind of just a steady, slow, steady upward trajectory. And so it's not as dramatic here, but there are some markets where these trends are certainly far more exaggerated.
And, Nick and I came of age as adults in Oklahoma City, and we saw the boom and bust there with oil and gas, not necessarily real estate, but oil and gas, and just knew that was a thing to be avoided. We saw huge fortunes be created and then lost very quickly, and just the emotional devastation that goes with that. And so we really like kind of steady, consistent, I wouldn't say conservative markets, but that's kind of the trend that I'm, where there's something innate about that market that makes it a strong market more than like attraction to it.
Really, all you need to do in real estate to be very successful, to be very, very wealthy in the long run,
here's your slide,
is to
feed you up for it.
Is to not lose your principal. As Warren Buffett would say, the number one rule of investing to not screw it up. I remember one of my mentors, I walked into his office and I'm like, "Hey man, how's it going? I saw the market's pretty tough out there." He's like, "Nick, would you like to buy 5 houses?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He had about 100 properties at the time. He's like,
this was in like 2011.
Yeah, this was at the heart of the crash, 2010, 2000. I think it was late 2009, maybe, when this was happening. And he explained to me what was going on in the greater economy. Fortunately, he did survive. He had probably about 70 properties when all was said and done, but he had to sell some of his properties to save the others, essentially, mostly due to what banks were forcing, not necessarily due to poor performance in his portfolio. And that is certainly seared into my memory of like, hey, let's try really hard to make sure we don't ever go through this, and we're probably going to do pretty well.
Yep.
And I really, I'm very grateful for the front row seat that we had to that crash, because I think it's allowed us to make really smart decisions since then, or again, allowing fear to guide us, as we opened with open the presentation with this evening. So yeah, we've talked about a lot of fun stuff.
Any questions
abstract
about
stuff.
multifamily before we kind of go into our conclusion slides
Yeah.
here? I loved the question.
Our call-in episode
Yeah.
there for single family stuff. We had lots of good questions there. Anyone want to trying to get into the multifamily market, or maybe they're an investor in fund 1 or fund 2 and they have questions about multifamily as it relates to that, or you need to get a little Jeopardy music or something like that, a little
That'd be
take our sound game to the next level.
Hey guys, can you hear me? I've got a question.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, is that Larry?
It's
Hi,
Larry.
Larry.
Yeah, another question. I was driving before, I would have chimed in.
Be safe.
Do you think? Yeah, I'm parked now. My question is with in the commercial space, in the multifamily commercial space, if folks have balloons coming due in the coming 6 to 12 months, do you think there's going to be much of an impact there? Do you think it's going to be a good time, bad time to be shopping for commercial properties? I just wonder how that will impact the overall economy, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
A good time for whom?
A good time for the investor that's looking to buy some deals. Like,
for the
would
buyer.
your prediction be that, yeah, that you think that's going to be favorable, or not a huge factor for the buyers?
I think for the sellers who are sophisticated, who have good banking relationships, they will figure something out with the bank. They will figure out a way to extend that note. Maybe there's a interest rate reprice or something like that. Maybe they have to bring more capital as kind of like a second down payment. I think the sophisticated investors will find a way to work through that. And so will the sophisticated bankers, because the investor doesn't want to give up their asset and the bank doesn't want to manage real estate. One of the big lessons that banks took away from the 2008 crash is that they do not want to be in the real estate industry. They want to be bankers. And so where there's good communication, where there's established relationships, where there's some creativity, some savvy on one or both of those parties, I think things will be worked out. Wherever there's a breakdown there, whether it's an inexperienced operator, an inexperienced banker, a relationship that's broken down, the banker's worried that even if they do something with that loan, that like the asset or the operator is just no good, they'd rather get it off their books before things get worse. I think that's where there will be opportunity. So absolutely be, calling people, be talking with bankers and sellers. One of the things that we talk about in seasons, I'm pointing to our picture here, is there are big seasonal pictures that apply to everyone, but then there's also like smaller seasons, right? So that investor might be in a winter period of their investment where their note is coming due. And you might be in a springtime and you're investing where maybe you have some capital available, you're hungry, you're eager, you have a great banking relationship lined up. And that difference in the seasons there allows you to solve problems. And when any of us in anything in the economy, not just real estate, but when any of us solve a problem for someone else in the economy, that's when we're compensated with, financial gain. So I think there could be an opportunity there for you to find those that either the relationship has broke down or they're just kind of not savvy enough to rework that loan. I'm curious what you have to say, because you work with our bankers probably a little more than I do.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's difficult to overstate the amount of nervousness in the industry right now amongst owners that have notes that are ballooning, and then particularly amongst those lenders. So what we do is we reach out to lenders every day and say, hey, are there any notes that you have on your books that you're worried about? And in the past, the banks, oh, well, we would never reveal that private information. And no, we have no loans that we're nervous about in our entire portfolio.
Well, so much equity. We'll just
Right.
tell them they need to sell. And
today they're like, whoa, yeah, we've got like 17 of them. Which one would you like first? We've got a binder here for you.
One of our acquisitions 2
Wow.
weeks ago was from a banker that came to us and said, we're worried about this.
Yep.
So we've approached the seller and asked if they'd like to have a conversation with you. We have no idea where it will go. They may say no way, but we're nervous. There weren't enough problems in the loan covenant to for the bank to put any actual stress on the seller, but there was enough there to say, hey, why don't you all have a phone call? And that phone call led to us acquiring that asset.
Yeah. So from a psychological perspective, from an emotional perspective, a buyer that's in the market that has capital that's ready to deploy, and probably most critically at this juncture of a buyer that can get credit, that buyer is going to have an extraordinary advantage. And don't believe what we say, believe what we do. I mean, we didn't close on a single deal for the first 9 months of this year, and then we've closed on 5 deals or something like that since September. And the getting credit, that's the biggest thing. There's still some investment money out there. It's not as plentiful as it used to be. A lot of people are struggling to raise capital. Fortunately, we still have capital coming in. It's really getting a loan. There's actually a ton of cash out there that banks have to loan. They just don't know who to invest in. They don't know what project to back. They feel nervous about everything. But then as soon as you can convince them that your project is a good project, that they should invest in, that they should lend on, all of a sudden you can get really strong terms, or at least we're able to get really strong terms right now at extraordinary interest rates relative to some of the other rates we're seeing in the market. But I'm also doing some coaching with some investors where they can't. I had a call today. I had a call today where they're under contract on like a great deal on a property. They can't get the bank on board, and so they've got cash, they've got income to support the note, but they can't get the bank on board. So they're going to cancel the contract because they literally can't close because they can't get a bank to agree to support the project. And there are lenders out there that will fund, but at what cost? And you don't want to borrow from those lenders. If you can get a good regional bank behind you, that's really what you want to do right now. But they're all quite nervous. So yeah, that's the climate that you'll be in the next six months.
Build your relationship with your banks now.
Yeah.
Right? Just like any relationship, you don't just want to call a friend when you want something. You want to have an actual relationship. So everyone, if you're thinking about active investing, build your relationships now. It need not be complex. I'm sure a lot of our human minds are saying, but I don't know what to say. I don't know who to call. I'm not smart enough, whatever. Call your local regional bank. If you have any sort of connection that someone can give you a referral, that's great. If not, that's okay. Just send them an email, do a call. And literally that meeting is not necessarily to talk about business. It's to build a relationship, who you are, who they are, what hobbies do you have in common, get them to know, like, and trust you, trust being the most important, so that when you're asking for that debt, they see you as, like Nick said, as like that it's worthwhile to invest in you.
Here's a very real conversation that I had recently. Got a great relationship with his lender. He happens to be like the president of the branch, and his desk is like right there when you go to like the teller desk or whatever. So I made sure to like physically go to that branch, do a little bit of business, and oh, hey, how's it going? Yeah. So what do you think, about the market out there? What do you think about the economic conditions? Back when we talked about, doing some business together, we talked about how we buy in times of winter. We really wanted this relationship with you to be ready to go in times of winter. How do y'all feel about that right now? And the banker says, like he thought about it really carefully. He said, Nick, it would be a shame to let a good crisis go to waste.
This was at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
Was when this conversation happened.
And I very deliberately framed that conversation. I didn't call him and put him on the spot. Like he could have just kind of shrugged off the conversation because it was a casual encounter. But I needed to get a little bit of commitment from this banker and several other bankers before we went out and started, because that was right before we just put the pedal to the metal. We started buying everything when we perceived that things were about to open up after COVID first hit. Like that's the level of intentionality that we put into those relationships with those lenders.
Good luck getting something under contract and getting it financed.
Yep.
Excellent question, Larry.
And then Mark had one question as well.
You're welcome.
Mark, your questions are always so pointed here. How do you strategize for future financing for Discovery Square in 2 years? Excellent question. So Discovery Square is this insane deal. We just did the webinar for it last week. Days ago. It's a $27 million deal. What we're cooking up right now is we'd only put $3 million down on this deal, just an unbelievably low down payment, and assume the in-place financing, which is at a 2.37% interest rate. So just crazy favorable financing, when, going rates out there are north of 7% right now, 6.75%, something like that. And there's 2 years left on that in-place financing. So Mark's question, Mark is I guess I shouldn't say whether or not he's an investor in Fund 2. He's just an interested party. He's a person wondering, well, what's our plan for when that 2 years expires? So we're going to put another $2 million, let's say, of construction expenditure into the asset, and we're going to create way more than $2 million of value doing that build out. We're going to add between 12 and 14 townhomes to the main floor commercial space, fill up that main floor commercial space. I project we're going to achieve somewhere in the neighborhood of 25% rent escalations for about half of the units there. And that's not very speculative. There's just a bunch of low rental rates from the initial lease up of the building. It's a new construction building that's only recently stabilized. If you look at a historical rent roll, they've gone from I forget the exact numbers, 130,000 in gross monthly rent a year ago to 190,000, from 130 to 190 just in the last 12 months alone. We're going to keep that going. And so by the time we get to 2 years from now, we should be able to underwrite for really favorable debt. There's going to be really strong net operating income. We're going to go from 2 million in NOI to, or I'm sorry.
You mean to pull up your pro formas?
Yeah, actually, if you would just pull up RDS underwriting.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. It might as well be my desktop background. I've been looking at it so much. So we're going to go from 1.2 million. I'm sorry, scroll to the right a little bit there. There we go. Okay.
There you go.
1.1 million, 1.087 million in net operating income, in place net operating income, to 2.1 million in net operating income. Now that's a staggering advance in NOI that usually seems just unbelievable, almost farcical. But I'm very confident our team's going to be able to achieve that. I'm going to even say it's not even going to be difficult. We're just applying all the systems and processes that have made us so successful on all of our other assets. Check this out. So Douglas Trail Townhomes, our pro forma was so crazy that the appraiser threw it out, and they said, well, it's impossible to achieve these results. In-place rents were $1,000 a month. We've already
we closed on it about 2 weeks ago.
We closed on it 2 weeks ago, and we've already turned over 6 units at $1,300 a month. So 30% rent escalation. Who knew? If you renovate units, treat tenants with dignity and respect, pick up the phone when people call, people are happy to pay for that premium. That was such a ludicrous premium that the appraiser wouldn't even believe it. We had to, I spent so many hours going back and forth with that appraiser. So, the same people that can do a 30% delta on Douglas Trail, 25% delta on in-place rents for RDS is going to be nothing. So that's how we're going to be able to get to a place where, let's say we double or triple the interest rate on that loan 2 years from now when that loan expires. Maybe we have to bring a little bit of cash to close the loan 2 years from now, but hopefully not. By my calculations, the building can easily support a $23 million note at 6% on a 30-year amortization with the 2.1 million in net operating income. That would put us at a 1.26 debt service coverage ratio. Usually need to be north of a 1.20 debt service coverage ratio. So there's margins, kind of all over the place here. And when I talk to our loan broker that we work with a lot, who I would say knows this stuff better than anyone, he feels like that 6% number is a good number. We actually have a quote right now for 5.8% on that building, because we're actually doing a whole parallel lending process on it, just as a plan B. I always like having a plan B, plan C, plan D, and I'm curious what debt options are out there to be kind of underwriting for the future. Best way to figure out what a bank might think of it 2 years from now is to find out what they might think of it today, right? So there's 17 answers I could give you to that question, Mark. There's 4 of them. Hopefully you found that helpful. But this is the level of intentionality that you need to put into a deal like that, right? Because you can get spoiled on that 2.37% interest rate loan,
yep,
and not realize that you could be in a pickle down the road if you haven't prepared for that. So
yep,
we're preparing for that.
And we've seen that so many times from our acquisitions.
Yes.
That when we ask, well, what's causing the sale, it's that the interest rate has changed. And so we know that narrative and do everything we can to avoid it.
Let's not get trapped in the thing that lets us get all these great deals from other distressed sellers.
Absolutely. Excellent questions.
Yeah.
Let's talk about kind of our summary. You're welcome, Mark. Thank you. Let's talk about some of our summary slides of kind of, what do you do? What are we doing? What do we believe is a good investment thesis? Buy now. I mean, that is always our thesis is buy now, buy real estate and wait. It's time in the market. Buy multifamily or single family. People are still asking us, years later, are you going to abandon single family? Do you like multifamily more? We like them both for different reasons. So single family is easier for people to get involved with. We kind of call them little money machines. We have a team that can acquire a single family home with probably no more than like 6 or 8 hours of work. They're easy to renovate, easy to refinance, and they transact based on comps. Multifamily is obviously much harder. It's a longer runway, takes a lot more moving pieces to get everything together, and they transact based on net operating income and cap rate. And so they're even though it's all real estate and it's all long-term residential real estate, they're a little bit different from each other. And so we really believe in a balanced portfolio. So we like both single family and multifamily.
Earlier in this year, we saw more opportunity in the single family space and the multifamily space. We were writing offers on both. We weren't getting 75 to 90% of those offers accepted on either of them because they were both high. But we basically spent all of the money in fund one on single family homes earlier in this year. And then there was kind of a pivot point about halfway through the year when rates had kind of hit a tipping point, and all of a sudden the value of multifamily was going down. Multifamily kind of responded to that lever very quickly. And now we're buying multifamily like crazy. Basically spending all the money we have on multifamily.
And then we just emailed our banker like literally 15 minutes before this presentation saying, hey, we are planning to acquire more single family in like December, January, like let's get debt going. So we're always kind of going back and forth. Buy below replacement cost. That comes straight from Warren Buffett. That's nothing, genius that we've come up with ourselves. Stay cash flow positive. I have a really good exercise in like 2 more slides. So if you're getting tired or anything, hang with me. There's a really good thing at the end that I want to talk about for cash flow. I'm always
blown away. Like 100% of the people are still with us 90 minutes in. So
I
like in your appreciate that so much.
Feet up, popping your popcorn.
Appreciate that so much.
We really do. It means a great deal to us. Stay in the market and buy things you will be glad to own 10 years from now. This has been our investment thesis for the entire, 10 plus years that we've been investing. And it doesn't really change that much depending on how the market is. The tactics change, what we're willing to pay, how we're writing our offers, how quickly we're looking at properties, what the terms of our offers are, but the general strategy has stayed the same. This is really basically our timeless principles in one slide. Nick, I want you to speak to now is a good time for an ARM, because I know when I saw that in the slide, I said, Nick, that's going to spook people.
You shouted it across the hallway. You're like, Nick, did you put ARM on here?
Well, because everyone talks about fixed rate debt. And that's what we're doing in all of our multifamily. And so I do agree with your assessment about an ARM for single family, but I want you to explain that to people.
Well, there's a lot of consistency there. So our fixed rate stuff on the multifamily side is typically 5 years fixed. So an ARM, very common to get like a 5-1 ARM that's 5 years fixed, and then it floats after that 5-year period, that initial 5-year period. Rates are probably going to keep going up for a while. They're going to peak somewhere and then they're going to start going down. And over the next 5 years, it's very likely that rates are going to be lower 5 years from now than they are today. I'm going to say that a second time. It's very, very, very likely that 5 years from now, rates will be lower than they are today. I can't tell you where they go in the meantime, but ARMs are super neat.
They're going to go up and then they're going to go down.
They're going to go up and they're going to go down. And so you're going to be fixed during the time when it's really, it's the favorable part. Just the ARM right now, if you got like a 5-1 ARM, it matches up perfectly with kind of the yield curve where rates are expected to go. I hope that makes sense. You're fixed when it's good to be fixed. And then 5 years from now, your rate would be lower than if you were to get a new adjustable rate mortgage then, because that's just how adjustable rate mortgages work. Is there's typically a smaller spread when rates are high than when rates are low. So you're going to thank yourself now that you get a cheaper fixed rate loan for 5 years than a 30-year fix. You get a better rate on an ARM than you do on a 30-year fixed. And then 5 years from now, you're going to thank yourself that you've got a cheaper variable rate loan than you could get then. So you'd win both ways.
And historically over the last, I think it's like 30 years, ARMs have beat out fixed rate debt. They just have a
every time.
they just have a very negative reputation, but the data shows that they're typically a better lending product.
They're a good product.
These are my notes directly from the mastermind with Gary Keller that I'm in, like literally word for word. I didn't edit them. I just put the red and the bold there, but these are just the notes as, you know, he's on our side of the camera and he's talking usually with a couple of, you know, great people with him. And I'm literally just trying to type.
I just want to brag on Elaine for a second. So she's like BFFs with Wendy Papazon.
I've had like a few phone calls with her. Don't exaggerate it.
She's
But
like
she is amazing. And I talk about her every day. Like she does goal setting and she like has this great relationship with her husband. And so you think that we're BFFs. I'm working toward that. I'm very impressed with her.
Cool. I don't even know. She just like pinged you one day on Facebook or whatever. She's like,
an amazing person.
Elaine, you're cool. I want to know you.
Well, I think she's amazing. So these are my notes. I'm just going to read them verbatim.
Wendy Papazon is the wife of the like main business partner of Gary Keller.
There you go.
Just for some context there.
So this is Gary speaking in his mastermind, and he's a very humble person. And he said, in the 80s, my financial advisors, Gary's financial advisors, told him not to buy real estate because what was happening now was happening in the 80s. And he kind of chuckled. And he said, over the last 30 years, the stock market has returned 9.9%. So it's about 8 to 10% per year. And then the game in real estate is, can you beat that? Can you beat the stock market? Investment real estate tends to be priced around its cash flow, and that's generally around 6%. And then the rest of the profits from real estate are debt pay down, appreciation, and changing the value of real estate. And then this is straight out of Gary's mouth. The number one way to make wealth is to change the value of the property you buy. The number one way to make wealth is to change the value of the property that you buy. And so this is Gary, kind of people asking him, you know, should I invest in real estate? And he's saying, well, in the 80s, everyone was telling me no. Clearly, Gary's doing really well. Clearly, Gary owns some very valuable real estate because he bought good real estate in a good location and held on. And the cash flow tends not to be the major driver of wealth. This is the thing that I wanted everyone to stay for. And I'm going to really make sure I hammer this because it's so important. We had some coaching clients in town for an all-day coaching event. And we spent like
we forgot to take any pictures of them for social media. And I feel like an idiot.
Nick and I are so old.
We were so focused on actually coaching them that we forgot. That was the whole point of the thing. It
wasn't the whole point, but it would have been nice to take some pictures. We're a little out of the social media. We need some younger folks around us to remind us to take pictures of everything. But we taught them about how cash flow is a protection mechanism. It is generally not a wealth building mechanism. And that's so antithetical to most of the real estate investment advice out there. And, you know, this has been our philosophy for a while. So I'm sure that part of the reason what Gary said stuck so much in my ear is because it validates my investment thesis. But I think Gary's really smart and he's been around much longer than I have. He's seen many more deals than I have. And his investment thesis matches my investment thesis, or my investment thesis matches his. So if you're at a place where you can, you know, pull out your phone or get to a computer, now would be the time, because if you can see the slide here, this will be more impactful than if you're just listening. I'm going to do my absolute best to make it so that if you're just listening, you get as much out of it. So in times in economically challenging times, the question is, you know, should I invest? And if so, what type of metric do I use to invest? And everyone follows cash flow. Everyone talks about cash on cash. You know, we're hearing less about like the 1% rule or the 10% cash on cash, but that's how this conversation came up with our coaching students who were in town. And, you know, we really think that those rules are long dead and that they've not been useful for many, many years. And our investment thesis is not built around cash flow as the main metric. And we're going to show you here why. So this is a real property. There's the street address. I don't have the city and state to give them like a little bit of privacy because they're actively working this deal, trying to get it under contract.
Well, this is a live deal.
A live deal.
Not a hypothetical.
It's not in Rochester. I'll say that. The numbers look a lot like Rochester though. So this is a very nice 3-bed, 3-bath home with a great kitchen.
This is thousands of miles from Rochester. Rochester is not a magical market in the slightest.
Nope. 3-bed, 3-bath, nice hardwood floors throughout, a very nice large kitchen, 2-story with like a great room. The bedrooms are upstairs, a very nice home that myself and anyone on this call would really enjoy living in. And it's in Texas. I'll say that to kind of give you some sense of the pricing.
You guess from the taxes.
Yeah. So the price of this home is listed at $300,000. It was one day on market, the day that we were talking about it. And we projected together that the rental rate might be around $2,400. Insurance is $85 a month. Taxes, I'm sorry, these are Rochester numbers.
Yeah.
We changed it to Rochester numbers so that we could speak in our numbers because we didn't know their rental rates and
Okay.
stuff.
Okay.
Okay. So these are Rochester numbers.
They were 400 a month on taxes.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are Rochester numbers, but Rochester is not a magical market. We merely use Rochester numbers because I could estimate insurance and rental rate, and they didn't quite know those numbers for their market. So, and we there's no way we could have researched them in just the hour we had together. So $300,000 purchase price that could rent for $2,400 per month, $85 in insurance, $225 in taxes, $200 per month in maintenance, no utilities because it's a single family home. So the renters will pay for utilities. A 3% vacancy rate, a 13% all-in management cost. That's a total expense of $894 per month. That yields an NOI of a little over $1,500 per month. Debt service at a 80% LTV, 6%, 30-year amortization is $1,438 per month, with $238 of that going to debt pay down.
And that's debt. That's the exact term sheet we just closed on a whole string of properties. That's not a hypothetical term sheet for debt.
Yep. So those numbers there yield cash flow, which in this scenario is $68 per month, which is a 1.26% cash on cash rate of return, which most people would say is nowhere near good enough. That doesn't make sense. I don't want to invest. Next, what else is out there?
I think that was their exact sentiment at this point in the coaching engagement was, why the hell are we thinking about investing in real estate if we're only going to make, less than $100 a month?
Yep. So then I said, well, maybe the market's turning. Maybe in 2 weeks, this house is still on the market. You call the listing agent, you say, I won't have a lot of contingencies in my offers, maybe waive inspection, maybe you're able to pay cash, all sorts of things. Maybe you can negotiate a discount and pay $275. That's kind of a long shot, but they're out there. Nick and I have done it many, many times. We call it playing the lottery. You call the listings and you find out who's the person that really needs to sell right now and they're willing to take a lower price. So all of the other numbers stay the same, except for debt service and debt pay down, because the mortgage is, the total value of the home is $25,000 less. So that yields cash flow of $177 per month, 3.5% cash on cash rate of return. So that's what we've seen over the last couple of years, is kind of that 3 to 5% number, like right around 150 to 250 per month. Low, both in terms of percentage and in terms of, number of dollars. $177 per month is not likely to change the lives of anyone on this call. You would need to own many, many, many homes generating $177 per month to have any chance of financial freedom, particularly when you add on things like health insurance. And if you're financially free, you're probably going to want to vacation more and those sorts of things. So even then it's like, tell me again why we're doing this real estate thing. Like, real estate's like kind of hard. Like, why are we doing this? So then I said, well, what if you can't get a discount? What if they're just sticking to their price? It's a really great house. It's in a great neighborhood. You're willing to pay the whole $300,000, kind of bumping up the rental rate to match the discount here. So bumping up the rental rate would be $2,550. So is that feasible? Is it possible that with great staging, great photos, a great leasing team, maybe allowing some pets, and there's a couple of pet rent in there, maybe someone can get $2,550? And that makes the numbers 3.58, which is almost exactly 3.54. So it's $194 per month. So again, $194 per month is not likely to really change anyone's life.
And notice that those offsets are almost identical to one another. People say that going from like $275 to $300 a month is suddenly like your purchase price is just insurmountable. And like it just doesn't move the number. Like, it's not that big of a difference, no different than that $150 per month spread in rental rate.
And this is all at current interest rates. This is at a 6% mortgage, with a 30-year amortization. So then we have to ask ourselves, going back to what Gary said, that real estate tends to be priced around cash flow, and the rest of profit from real estate is debt pay down, appreciation, and changing the value of real estate. So we look at appreciation, we always put in 4% in our pro formas. And you might ask yourself, where does that come from? So 4% is the historic average over the last 100 years in all non-rural areas in the United States. If you've heard our content before, you're probably like saying it along with me because you know how important that metric is to us. So even over the last several years, when appreciation has been 8%, 10%, 12%, 20%, we always kept putting 4% in our pro forma, even when like we would have, I mean, we're humans too. We'd be like, oh, we should bump it up to 5, or, we're like, it's like 12%. Like what's 5 going to hurt? And we just always stick with 4% because that's the historical average. It's actually 4.4%. So we're like handicapping ourselves, even a little bit in our pro forma. So that's about $1,000 per month. Of course, if you start off of a lower purchase price, it's a little under $1,000, but it's about $1,000 per month. 4% appreciation on a $300,000 purchase price. And then you have your debt pay down. It's a little bit less, obviously, if your mortgage is a little bit less because of the purchase price, but it's about $225, $238 per month. Those two numbers, let's call that $1,250, right? So we're adding $1,000 of appreciation and let's call it $250 or $230 a month of debt pay down. Those two numbers are 4 to 5 times bigger than even your most optimistic cash flow number. And those two numbers, debt pay down is the only thing that's fixed. It's the only thing that you and the bank are contractually obligated to a certain debt pay down per month. Even cash flow is not guaranteed. I think there's this like fantasy with real estate investors that cash flow is guaranteed. That's just not true. Cash flow is a short-term projection, so it's a little easier to predict. Appreciation is a longer term projection, so it's a little harder to predict, but they're all predictions, right? And when you plan to hold forever, then you can have some certainty that appreciation is likely to follow what it has done the last 100 years, which is about 4%. Of course, you don't sell during the down times and you enjoy the positive times. We have loved doing our balance sheet with the appreciation over the last several years, but we always planned for a 4% appreciation rate. So when you add all those up together, cash flow, appreciation, and debt pay down, not looking at all at tax advantages. So in our pro forma, we don't look at all at tax advantages. Tax advantages are icing on the cake or whatever other metaphor you want to say. It's about $1,300 to $1,400 per month. So that's starting to be a number that like can kind of change things, right? That's like, okay, get 2 or 3 of those, I can pay my mortgage. Get another one of those, I can like start putting the kid through college. Another one pays for my groceries for the whole month. Another one pays for the health insurance, right? Like, so that number is the number that we're seeking as real estate investors. And then when you look at cash flow, appreciation, and debt pay down, those 3 numbers combined divided by the total investment, which is the down payment, plus I put in a little metric there for make ready. This house was like pristine and likely didn't need much, but you should always have some buffer for a good deep cleaning, a good landscaping. There's always something that's fiddly that needs to be fixed a little bit. You get to a 24, a 26, or a 26% total annualized rate of return. Despite the fact that the cash flow and the cash on cash rate of return is very different in these 3 scenarios, it generally comes out to about 25% for a total annualized rate of return. And you can see how our business model of a cash out refi in less than 5 years, I don't want to say it becomes inevitable because things can always change and deals always go sideways and those sorts of things, but you can see how it becomes a very repeatable pattern because 5 years gives you a 1 year of a buffer, because if there's a 25% rate of return, you only need 4 years to return all of the original capital. And so then that begs the question, well, then what's cash flow about? We think that cash flow is about protection. We think that the difference in $194 per month in cash flow and $68 per month in cash flow is really to cover when that furnace goes out or when there's a little more vacancy than you anticipated, or maybe you can't quite get the rental rate that you anticipated, or you want to upgrade your property. Maybe you want to put in a fence or put in some LVP instead of carpet. So that's what cash flow is for. Cash flow is to keep someone in the game, and the total annualized rate of return is the real wealth creation, the real wealth generator. And the reason we're talking about all of this in terms of state of the market is state of the market does matter. Absolutely. I don't want to send the projection at the end here that everything that we talked about doesn't matter. But you can see how it matters so much less when you were thinking about buying high quality real estate at the best price you can, getting the best rental rate that you can, taking great care of that property, having excellent operations to minimize your expenses, holding that property for as long as possible, merely plugging in the 100-year average of appreciation, and then just holding. And then just saying, let's let 10 years pass. Let's let 20 years pass. Let's let 30 years pass. If we talk about generational wealth and real estate, then we probably shouldn't transact real estate every couple of years. We probably ought to hold real estate for a generation. And so my message here at the end is buy good real estate that's cash flow positive. Don't be as concerned with the price or the rental rate so long as you're cash flow positive. Hold it for at least a decade or more, take very good care of it, and you'll get that 25% total annualized rate of return. This is real wealth. This is what has changed our lives and has changed the lives of so many investors that we've talked with. And I just had to include this here because our coaching students, I mean, they were just like stunned.
Yeah.
I mean, they like, you could just see their eyes. They were like I've never even like heard of total annualized rate of return before.
They only heard of cash on cash rate of return.
And they had turned down so many deals, like, and they were starting to feel so frustrated of, one person in the relationship was a physician, the other was a well-paid professional outside of medicine. Of, how can I really change my life on $200 per month? Well, the truth is you can't. The $200 per month keeps you in the game. The 25% total annualized rate of return changes your life, and you can get this in any market with the right tactics and a long enough hold period.
And people always,
I'm going to drop my mic and take a
pretty
drink.
good. Yeah, I'm struggling. My cough is going crazy here. People, really say, how do you find a good deal? And we'll say, well, how many deals have you looked at? Oh, no, we thought about looking at a bunch of them. Okay. If you go walk 100 deals, if you go do this underwriting exercise, 100 deals, you're going to own some real estate when you get done. That's unavoidable. That's all there's to it. You just have to do the repetitions. So
looks like Hannah has a question.
Oops. Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Hello. Oh. There
Okay.
you are. How are
I'm
you?
here. Good. Great. Okay, so like I've revisited this concept multiple times and I haven't really talked about that second number, that 25% in a while. And so hearing it again, it's like, yeah, that's awesome. But the one thing I'm having trouble with is I keep hearing that because there was such an accelerated rate of appreciation the last couple of years, that the next couple of years, or I don't know if couple is the right term, but that the next 10 years, or I've heard it's as many as 10 years, is going to be flat. Like no, like that average, of course, will remain true, but because recently it's been so accelerated that there's going to be a period of flattening. And if you wanted to, let's say, buy a couple of properties and then in like 3, 5, or 7 years, maybe sell, consolidate, and get into something bigger, that you might have trouble. You'll still get the debt pay down and other things, but that the appreciation, if flat, would be not helpful.
So I think the thing to think about there, I think, is affordability, right? So housing prices, both in terms of mortgages and rental rates, have to follow incomes at least somewhat. We know from the European countries that there's room to grow there, that Americans pay a smaller portion of their total take-home income to housing than the European countries do. So there's likely some room there. I don't think it's untrue or unwise to think about the idea that perhaps there's been some escalated appreciation over the last several years that's kind of like gobbling up some of the future appreciation. But I think if someone acquired today, when we look at in the last year, there's been like 13% year over year price growth in our market. It's unlikely that that's just going to like go to zero in the next year, right? So you only have to get like 1 or 2 years of well above 4% to like bump your average up so that over like a 10-year hold period, you can weather some storms. I don't have a lot of worry about kind of muted, values of real estate. Another thing that comes to mind that we talk about a lot is that there's such a a dearth of supply in both single family and multifamily housing in the entire country because of the 2008 builder collapse, where so many builders and skilled tradespeople just left the profession. They went to become, police officers and teachers and other things, and they didn't come back when the economy got better. They stayed in whatever profession they were doing. And so we really have to build our way out of this housing crisis. So that's not something I worry about. And like the thing you said, there was like a 3 or a 5 or a 7-year hold period. Like the longer your hold period, the better, right? We own some big real estate, like 30, 35 million pieces of real estate. We still own our single families. We've never sold them. Just do a cash out refi, hold them, and still buy the bigger thing. But then you don't have to get sucked into this, like, well, what's the value of my property right now? Like cash out refi when it's high, buy the next property. But the longer you can hold, the better. The properties that have done, the best for us, both in terms of the number of times we've cashed them out and in terms of how low the maintenance is and how well we know them, are the properties we've owned for a decade. We've already maintained everything. We already know all the quirks and everything about that property. We've had tenants living in them for, 3 or 5 years. Like, the longer you can hold real estate, the better to get these averages.
What's the most you've cashed out a single property? Do you have like a record?
I think we've cashed some out 4 times.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which sounds crazy, and it is.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
but
a lot of fun.
That's how the math works.
Yep.
What's the I don't know how expensive that property was, but let's say it was like 300. What's the cost of that refi? The actual, like the short-term one-time cost?
What do you mean the cost?
Like the
of
closing
refi?
costs?
The closing costs each
We've been
time.
able to negotiate our refi costs down to almost zero with many of our lenders. So we have multiple refis that we're working on right now. So one of them, I guess I'm going to hope that our total cost on that is like 0.01% if we're able to play our cards right. And that's negotiation. There's a lot of different factors. We could dive deep into the subject matter, but it can be far cheaper to do a refi than to get new debt.
Yep.
And that's
I would
not
say
the
for a
typical-
conventional refi, assume, 5,000 plus. And for a commercial refi, assume around 1% of asset value. Those are some like numbers that even if someone doesn't have, a ton of commercial lending relationships or a ton of experience, like a decent bank would give you a proposal at around 1% or less of asset value for closing costs on a commercial loan.
Yep. And I don't want to get too fancy, but like new 52 apartments, for example, is just something that's prominent in my mind right second, because I was working on that today. We bought that last August or so, September, something like that. We did a cash out refi on that in February. And we're doing another cash out refi again right now. And we got a second lien in February. We're going to get a third lien on it today, all with the same bank. And so our origination charges on that are almost zero. I don't know what they are as a percent, but they're extraordinarily low. It's not even sensical to calculate them like as a closing cost percentage or whatever. And I just said, hey, we've got this appraisal sitting out. We're not even going to pay for an appraisal. We're just saying, hey, can we just use the appraisal from before? It's probably only gone up since then. So probably be to your advantage if we just use the appraisal. So that'll save us, $5,000 on the appraisal. So we might get, $1 million, $1.5 million in loan proceeds and pay. I mean, I don't want to quote a number because I really don't know what the origination charges are going to be, like $10,000 or something. Like that's a.
So if you're treating the appraisal as the same, what's the advantage to redoing it from such a recent refi?
The last time we refied it, they found our outcomes. You know how I was saying I couldn't get the appraiser to like get on board with how insane our outcomes were?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes the appraisers like accuse us of like falsifying lease agreements or whatever. And after they look at like 30 of the lease agreements, they're like, okay, they're all legit leases now, so the appraiser didn't believe it. Then the bank didn't believe it. And they said, okay, we're going to handicap your LTV to like a lower LTV. So, but if you had owned it for a year, then we would believe it. So we went back after a year. We said, okay, now you'll believe it, right? Because last time you said we don't believe it because it hasn't been a year. So by your own words, now you have to believe, right? That's the logical syllogism there. And we're kind of annoying sometimes. And so the bank's going to give us the rest. We're hey, let's just finish what we did before. And of course, like you wouldn't charge us a second set of origination charges, right? Because we paid those origination charges last time. Why would we pay that on the same loan the second time around?
Proof of concept.
So
yeah.
that's a specific example, but just the point is there are a million maneuvers by which when you're in the commercial lending world, your cash out refi can be a really inexpensive maneuver. And that's how we get to where we can cash out these properties over and over and over again.
About, a metric that we say is that to really do this at scale, about 50% of someone's time should be spent on the deal and 50% should be spent on the debt.
Yeah.
That's how important the debt is.
That is everything on these commercial deals.
Good questions.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Hannah.
Yep.
You too.
I'm not too worried about cost seg. Here's a headline I would fear. I don't think this
Wait,
headline's
what's,
coming.
is there a question or you're just,
Her question was about depreciation going away and that being a headwind.
did I miss that?
Did I miss that?
Who, me?
Way back when we started this question, like 15 minutes ago, it was, weren't you worried that I could have had a stroke?
I don't,
Oh,
I did not,
I
both
would-
of us did, either Nick
No, I
did
didn't talk
something and
about depreciation. I talked about just the lack of continued appreciation.
Oh, continued
With flat.
appreciation. I
Yeah.
thought you said continued depreciation.
No, muted depreciation over the next several years because there's been a bolus of appreciation
Okay.
recently.
I thought you said continued depreciation. I stepped over there to get a drink. I apologize. That is a common question we get, by the way. Just let me finish
Yeah,
my
that's also happening.
poor hearing thought. People worry that the 100% bonus depreciation is going to go away, and that's going to result in muted appreciation because there's muted depreciation. That's a headwind that will lower values or lower appreciation, but it's not going to be a huge amount. The only thing I really fear in single family or multifamily, remember how the government, last time there was a housing crash, they gave away like a $9,000 per home credit if you like built a new home or something. If they did something like that, but they did like a $100,000 per home credit or like a $50,000 per apartment unit credit, the government did something
To change supply and
change
demand.
Supply.
Yeah.
That's right. Right now, there's way more demand than supply, and there is I mean, we're building supply, and it is hard. It is really painful and really expensive, not very profitable. We're getting it more profitable.
Is there, sorry to dominate, I'm happy to like come off if someone else wants to ask questions, but is there, sorry, my radiology screen turned off. Is there talk in your masterminds or Keller or any of that about the political like reemergence of increasing the bonus depreciation again, like in another couple years?
Probably not.
Not really. No,
No chatter.
Unlikely.
I think that's unlikely. I
Yeah.
think that the political will to do that when housing is becoming unaffordable for people is just not there. Yeah.
Yep.
Apparently Trump is running for office again as of tomorrow.
Vote for Trump, I guess.
I'm
if you
not
want.
commenting on Trump at all, but he was favorable to real estate investors when he was making policy. So maybe that's a future where it would come back. I don't know.
We may not have
No
Ukraine,
comment.
but we'd have bonus appreciation.
Yep. Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, great.
Larry, you want to wrap us up tonight?
I just wanted to share one helpful tip, if I could, that's been enormously game-changing for me, per Nick's discussion about getting zero cost origination for refi. If you're planning to do any sort of rehab, I've discovered recently as renovated appraisals, if you get those up front,
Mhm.
getting the current value versus the renovated value. I've had a couple of transactions recently in the commercial space where it's allowed me to use that as renovated value to get zero origination and very favorable quick cash right back at me. So just wanted to share that.
Good
Yes.
tip. Very good tip. Thank you.
Yeah, when you get an appraisal done, if it's a property you plan to make improvements to, you can ask the appraiser to appraise it as is and as complete as the your ARV or when your renovations are complete, and you can get almost 2 appraisals for the price of 1. In the commercial real estate space, that's extraordinarily helpful because the appraiser will take a look at your apartment building and say, like, for example, our Garden Court West building, this is going to sound crazy, but we bought it for 9.8 million, and then it's the as is appraisal came back at like 11 million, and then the as complete appraisal came back at like 15 million, or I think those are the approximate numbers. And then we just had another appraisal performed and as is 15 million, and as complete is 20 or 19.
19.8.
19.8. You're on fire tonight. And we're able to get kind of like 2 appraisals for the price of 1 on each of those, because we then take that appraisal, we go back to the bank and essentially kind of demand better terms from the bank. The bank has actually refrained to share the appraisal with us until after we close on the loan, because they know that it would give us so much leverage if they gave us the appraisal before we closed on the loan. That's how you know you've got a really good one on the line, when the bank won't give you the appraisal before closing. But it's still a really valuable thing to have, even if you don't use it for any other reason than just go to the bank and say, hey, we're done with our project. We don't even want you to give us more money, but give us a break on the rate, or there's lots of options that are available to you, and having that as complete number from the appraiser, invaluable to have.
Good call out there, Larry.
Thanks,
Hopefully
Larry.
that helps some folks. We're going to wrap up here so
Yeah.
we can go home and relieve our nanny. BlackSwanFund2.com. We have
Yeah.
just a few million left. We're doing a summary webinar. I believe it's next Monday. I looked it up
Is that
before.
a performance report, or is that a different one?
Oh, good call. So we're doing our Q3 performance report on Fund 1, Fund 2, and the Tech Fund next Monday, November 21st at 7 p.m. Central. You can go to meetblackswan.com and subscribe to the calendar, or join the mailing list for that. And then we're doing our summary webinar for all of the assets that we have in Fund 2 as kind of a last call for investing in Fund 2 on Tuesday, November 29th at noon Central. So if you're able to make that over the lunch hour or something, please do come. That'll be noon Central, but of course, a replay will go out. And we're really in our last call for Black Swan Fund 2.
About 30 days left to invest in Fund 2 at this time. We've got 6 or 7 assets in there now, and I mean it's looking pretty good. We're pretty darn excited with what we have put together.
Yeah.
And there's still a little bit of room left if anyone wants to jump in or increase their existing investment. I think the most common investing, we had like 10 of these people after the webinar last week. They wanted to invest money in fund. They're already invested in Fund 2 from like their personal money, and they wanted to invest in Fund 2 from their retirement account as like a second investment in Fund 2. And you can absolutely do that. We can help you with the paperwork and everything. So just let us know if you have funds coming from a different fund source or whatever. Just let us know. We love to keep the investor pool size as small as possible.
Yep.
And
Email either myself or Rachel. Justin, if you could put our email addresses there in chat, that would be helpful. Rachel and I can take care of the paperwork for you. And then our Black Swan Community Hour for December is December 12th at 8 p.m. Central. And this will be the first time we are bringing a guest from outside of Black Swan Real Estate. So we're super excited about that. We're bringing an amazing person to speak about goal setting and building, kind of the life of your dreams, those sorts of things, really in line with our mission and the things that we talk about. So we're really excited to bring a new voice. So be on the lookout for details for that. I think that's everything. I think that's all of our announcements. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening. I hope you all get excellent sleep, or if you're working, you have a great night at work. Thank you so much for your time and attention. It always means so much to us. We hope we're leading you well. We hope we're guiding you well. It's certainly a privilege of ours to be a part of your investing journey.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.